Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be reacting to...
History summarized: the other side of Greece.
Here's a question designed to trick you. Where is Greece? Now it seems obvious. Too obvious. I'm showing it to you right now. It's where the country called Greece is. Big peninsula, smaller peninsula, bunch of islands. Too easy. I even labeled it. But hold on a minute. That right there is the modern state, but there's also ancient Greece, and those things don't necessarily overlap. This is why you should never trust a rhetorical question. It's a ploy by Big Thesis designed to introduce a topic. However, today I am Big Thesis. It is me, and the point I'm making is that the defined geography of modern Greece skews our perception of ancient Greece, subconsciously omitting the parts which don't line up. Modern Greece is a mainland surrounded by islands, while the ancient Greek world is better understood as a circle of land surrounding the Aegean Sea, and that includes the east coast of this ginormous peninsula named Anatolia. The word in Greek simply means east, as it marks the place where the sun rises, and while it's indeed a bit to the right of the mythological center of the universe at Delphi, the Anatolian coast is not just an essential piece of the ancient Greek world, it's also where most of the cool stuff came from. Art, architecture, literature, philosophy, and more were pioneered on these eastern shores before being imported.
Oh, interesting.
That's really cool.
So all the
Wow.
stuff that is iconic for the Greek culture is actually come from Turkey. Well, isn't it? Is that what he's saying?
Can you go back
To what?
just a little bit?
How far?
Just one more. Like play.
Delphi, the Anatolian coast is not just an essential piece of the ancient Greek world, it's also where most of the cool stuff came from. Art, architecture,
The
literature,
Anatolia area.
Yes, Anatolia is what now is Turkey.
Oh.
philosophy, and more were pioneered on these eastern shores before being imported across the Aegean for latecomers like Athens to fiddle around with. Boom, Athens slander. I gotta get it where I can. So, what's so neat about this slice of land, and why did its place in Greek history get so muddled? Well, nothing to do but do some history. Now, Anatolia is a large place with over a dozen major regions and plenty of peoples calling it home over the centuries, but our story will focus in on three coastal areas, Aeolis, Ionia, and Thoris. Beyond being stacked adorably on top of each other like kids in a trench coat, these names tell us what kinds of Greeks lived there, because ancient Greeks didn't consider themselves one unified ethnicity, but grouped themselves mainly by dialect, and the three big ones were Aeolic, Ionic, and Doric. Ah, pattern. Now,
Kind of makes sense why there's like so much overlap with Turkish and Greek. Like everything, foods, like who owns baklava? Turkey, Greece. It's like if it's from that region, it was once Greek region, so they took it, over the sea to the mainland Greece.
I
But
don't
it's
know how
also in
much
Turkey,
overlap
so
there
it's
is, because for Lithuania had like a good chunk of Poland, like a big, like it had a. What was that to me?
what does Lithuania have to do with
No,
this?
because Lithuania, it was before it was a small country, it was a big
Okay.
country.
Mhm.
So can you say that every time a country was a bigger country in that space, now as time go by and then there's adjustments of boundaries, that still the culture of Lithuania still exists, Lithuanians exist where it used to be part of their land, their reach?
I think the distinguishing factor would be, I think here, like the Greek Empire, I think they occupied that region for the long
Yeah,
time.
that's what I'm
Lithuania
thinking.
was only there for like a
Uh-huh.
couple of years, so I think that's the difference. It wasn't enough of time to establish culture in that region, whereas the Greeks, I feel like they
Because then it wasn't Turkey, then it was
it was
ancient
Greece.
Greece.
Yeah, it was Greece. Yeah. So I think they were there for enough times for the culture to spread and kind of become one.
Yeah.
Whereas Lithuania, if Lithuania was part of, if Ukraine nowadays, Ukraine was part of Lithuania for like 50 years, it's just not enough times to, not enough generations to establish the culture.
records don't really tell us how Greeks first populated Anatolia. The best we get are post hoc founding myths concocted centuries afterwards. But if we compare those with the tribe's linguistic distribution and notice the cleanly mirrored placement across the Aegean, we can intuit a gradual migration of Greeks across the sea, starting possibly in the late Mycenaean era but picking up after the Bronze Age collapse, with the end result by the 700s BC being a constellation of Greek cities along the Anatolian coast. Aeolis and Ionia each had a 12-city dodecapolis, and Thoris rounded out the squad with a 6-city hexapolis. In contrast to the purpose-built colonies established in southern Italy during the Polish Age, these cities developed right along alongside those of the mainland, arising slowly and organically, sometimes over top of pre-existing Bronze Age settlements. And that was the case with the Mycenaean-era citadel of Milawanda, abandoned in the Dark Ages and later repopulated during the migrations. In the 7 to 500s, this city, known as Miletus or Miletos, had grown to become the premier polis of Ionia, of Anatolia, and possibly all of Greece. Miletus profited handsomely from trade with the seafaring Phoenicians and amassed a huge population to send out for its own colonies, founding as many as 90 all around the Black Sea and as far south as Egypt. The Milesians sent their people everywhere, but also brought the whole Mediterranean to them to visit the great sanctuary of Apollo at Didyma just outside Miletus. Similar to sites like Delphi and Olympia, the sanctuary attracted votive gifts from all over, becoming an open-air showcase of art and craftsmanship from Greece, Phoenicia, Egypt, and Assyria. And those eastern works heavily influenced the development of Greek art. But also, down in the Nile River colony of Naucratis, Greeks got an up-close view of monumental Egyptian statues, taking that inspiration for the immense scale and stylized figures of their own kudos statues back home. They also would have been awed by the enormity of Egyptian architecture, potentially accelerating Greece's evolution from wooden temples towards their iconic stone temples. And back in Ionia, the Ionic order, with its fancy scrolled columns and elegant running frieze, was pioneered at the great sanctuary of Hera at nearby Samos. And peaking slightly ahead, of the 4 Greek wonders of the ancient world, 3 will be in Anatolia. These were big evolutions, but all this Eastern contact shaped art and material culture on smaller and domestic scales as well, from textiles to roof tiles to pottery styles. The Greeks would take all these ideas in their own new directions as centuries unfolded, but most of the raw artistic inspiration, the spark, came from the east through Anatolia. But if the arts were a clear case of reception into innovation, something new and unique to Greece was emerging in literature. The eastern island of Chios was home to the legendary poet Homer, who probably took
Eos, isn't that the island with
The sap?
the sap? Yeah, I think that's the one.
the sprawling oral tradition of epic poetry and stitched it into the stories we know as the Iliad and Odyssey. Right out the gate, infinity poetry points to the Ionians. They win. They simply win. But one island north and a century later, the Aeolic poets Alcaeus and Sappho of Lesbos were at the forefront of a new style called lyric poetry, where the poet speaks not as a faceless vessel for the muses, but as a defined individual with experiences, opinions, and, in Sappho's case, a to-do list. Then, around 600 BC, a new kind of thought took shape on the coast. Not declarative, like poetry, but inquisitive, as Thales of Miletus sought to understand the nature and origins of the world through natural phenomena rather than divine ones. His fields of study were what we'd today call science, mathematics, and astronomy, but the core process of questions, deductions, and reasoning that Thales pioneered would spread, grow, and take shape as philosophy. During this formative pre-Socratic period between Thales and when Socrates kicks down the door to ruin everyone's day, Ionia remains squarely at the forefront of philosophy, producing thinkers like Anaximander, Heraclitus, Pythagoras, the geometry and triangles guy, and significantly many more. But the Ionians weren't done, as the underlying ideas of philosophy spread in new directions, and that quest for understanding took shape as 2 new fields, geography and history. Thales and Anaximander had pondered the full shape and size of the Earth, then Hecataeus of Miletus did the work to fully catalog the known world in his Periodos Ys, the journey around the Earth, starting from Gibraltar and Iberia and going clockwise around the Mediterranean to the north coast of Morocco. And last but likely most famous of all
The world according to the 5th century Greeks.
Wow. Or can we get a zoom? I want to see it bigger.
I mean, try to zoom. It's pretty cool how they saw the Earth. Let me see.
Is this based off their exploration or was
Yeah, I
just
think this is how they explored it through
explored?
the seas. Yeah, so
Oh,
Europa,
is that
Asia,
way?
Europa is that way, Asia, and down to Africa is all Libya. It's just Libya. Arabia. Oh, there's Arabia. Okay. I mean, it's a solid map, you know,
Yeah.
for back then. Obviously Europa,
Yeah.
Asia, that like they haven't
I'm
explored there, but
I'm surprised they don't put like, okay, be wary of this fish is this way, octopus is over there.
it's a solid map.
Yeah.
Gibraltar and Iberia and going clockwise around the Mediterranean to the north coast of Morocco. And last but likely most famous of all was Herodotus of Halicarnassus, whose book The Histories unified storytelling with geography to take the reader on a tour of the world across lands and through time. For all Herodotus' inaccuracies and outright nonsense, his skill was in stepping outside of his political and cultural perspective to present the most vivid picture of the ancient world yet seen, through a mostly objective viewpoint. Per his own words, the book is an inquiry, drawing a line back to the inquiries of Thales. Science, philosophy, and history are very different things now, but they sprang from a cohesive Ionian thought process. Now, the Eastern Greeks of Anatolia did not have a monopoly on culture, but similar to how we might think of Athens as the cultural beacon of the classical era, Anatolia, and Ionia in particular, were similarly the beacon, the center of gravity, in the Archaic Age. These Greeks produced the most innovative artisans and most renowned poets of their day, and set the model for how to think deeply and reason across several developing fields. One lens to understand the cultural accomplishments of the later classical period is that the mainland finally caught up. I'm joking, a little bit, but like, only a little bit. But here's the problem. With all the above being true, why is this not the main narrative of the Archaic period? Why are the 7 to 500s typically treated as just the setup to the good stuff, and why do the Ionians and co get only a cursory recognition in all this? The reflex answer is to blame Athens for sucking all the air out of the room, but there's something more complicated going on here, because for all that Anatolia did in the Greek world, it didn't stay in the Greek world, and we learn about all this from our buddy Herodotus in the form of the Persian Wars. See, in 546 BC, the Greek-adjacent kingdom of Lydia, just a ways inland, got conquered by the big new power on the peninsula, the Achaemenid Persian Empire, and by the end of the century, the whole Aegean coast was under the dominion of the great King Darius. Now, standard Persian procedure kept imperial rule relatively light and local culture intact, but the trade was Persia installing tyrants to govern the cities. In 499, a combination of general Ionian discontent and a local flashpoint in Miletus spread to a full-scale revolt. Fun in theory, painful in practice, and the end result was Persia violently reasserting its authority by destroying Miletus, razing the city, and enslaving whomever they didn't kill. One of the greatest Greek cities was in ruins, and Ionia got the unfortunate status of problem corner of the empire. All this, in turn, precipitates the Persian Wars against mainland Greece and the subsequent rise of the even more exploitative Athenian Empire. These are essential pillars of Hellenic history in which the Eastern Greeks are mere bit players subjugated by other people's empires, passing from Persian, Athenian, Persian again, until Alexander the Jumpscare flips the table and redraws the entire world. In the ensuing Hellenistic era and into the Age of Rome, Anatolia saw a spectacular reemergence with magnificent cities like Pergamon and Ephesus, but two things had also changed. After Persia rolled in, there was always a bigger center of cultural gravity. Sardis, Athens, Alexandria, Rome, Constantinople, Athens again but modern this time, Ionia never again had the same prominence as in the Archaic period. But the second change is that Persia inadvertently initiated the classical period by severing Anatolia from the rest of the Aegean Greek world. So the fundamental idea of classical Greece, so focused on Athens and Sparta, exists in a kind of opposition to the East, and thus to Ionia. That era became the iconic chapter of ancient Greek history, yet it just so happens to be the one which excludes the Eastern Greeks the most. Frustrating, maybe, but once we notice that lens, we can see how it colors the rest of our cultural memory, which in turn becomes an opportunity to understand that history better. That's the job. So, here's a question designed to get you thinking. Where's Greece? Thank you for watching.
Wow, that was I never knew the other side
Where's
of Greece.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't know I don't know anything about that side, and what's
Yeah.
how much came from
From
that
that
side
side.
too. Like that's very, very interesting.
Wow.
Part of Greek history. Of course, it's still I guess Greek because it's Greek culture. It's Greeks that live there. Culturally Greeks, so it is Greek. But uh, it just makes sense, the beef between two countries even more so. It goes way beyond Cyprus. You can see that. It's just so much overlap.
Can I see the
yeah.
comments?
Wow, very interesting video. Where is Greece? Red asked, looking around confused. Blue, completely silent, a suspiciously Hellenistic shaped lump in his cheeks. Whole minute in before taking pot shots at Athens. You're unusually restrained today.
It's just its positioning too as well kind of makes it difficult for you in the East to identify with the West because there's a sea that separates them completely.
It is interesting how they were like fighting overseas though. Like,
Still, yeah, same issue.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, of course, let us know your thoughts. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Join the Discord, and as always, share as much kindness as possible.